I had the feeling when people were saying to me last week, I'm sorry I'll not hear you, I'm away on holiday, and it happened about 10 times. I began to think they've been looking at who's speaking and decided to fly away as far as possible. So thank you for being here today. Signs and Wonders, a study in John's Gospel. So then, over the past 4 Sundays, we've looked at 4 of the 8 miracles or signs that John records in his Gospel. And we've noticed that how John himself gives us the reason he records certain miracles in his narrative of Jesus' life. He says at the end of the book, "Many other signs, therefore, Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." That's why he wrote the Gospel, and that's why he included the miracles. And we reminded ourselves that we'll not go far wrong in our understanding of these miracles if we try to discover how they point to Jesus as the Christ, the Son of God, the Saviour of mankind. John says in the middle of his book, he records Jesus' words, "Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Otherwise, believe because of the works themselves." But why these ones? Why these 8? Do you remember about a month ago when I started, I said you had a whole month to have a read through John's Gospel and have a think about these 8, and now you're thinking, oh, I remember he said that and I didn't do it. Well, I did it, which is just as well probably. Why these 8? Out of the 37 miracles recorded in the Gospels, why does John select these ones? And we asked at the start, about a month ago, if John had maybe chosen them at random. He's a very old man by the time he's on the island of Patmos writing his Gospel. Is he getting forgetful? Old men get forgetful. Ooh, glum looks from the 3 in the front here. Old men, you can't hear either. Old men get forgetful. But is John writing his narrative of the Gospel, and as he's writing it, is he thinking, oh, I remember Jesus doing that one, I'll put that one in? Now, if we wanted to, we could take each one of these stories and understand them and teach them individually without any reference to one another. That's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. And that's exactly what we have been doing these past 4 Sundays. We have taken 4 of the stories standalone, and we've tried to understand them in their own right. If that was all that there was, then it wouldn't matter when these stories occurred, when these miracles occurred, whether they occurred here, there, or wherever. We could take the story for what it is, read it, and understand it, and teach it. And that's what we've done. But today, as a matter of interest, we could ask ourselves another question, couldn't we? Is there something deeper going on here with these 8 miracles? For example, look at this first one. Miracle number 1. What's the point of this story? No wine. They have no wine, said Mary at the wedding to her son. They have no wine. And what's the point of miracle number 8? At Galilee, no fish. We have no fish, said the disciples. Jesus said, have you caught anything? You've been fishing all night. We have no fish. No wine, no fish. Miracle 1, nothing to drink. Miracle 8, nothing to eat. And Jesus provides in both cases. These miracles are signs, says John. He invariably calls them signs. They point to something. They're carrying a message, a deeper message than just what is on the surface. Just like miracle 4, we don't have too much time to talk about miracle 4 today. Miracle 4, when Jesus feeds the crowds with the loaves and the fishes, it was a sign. It was a sign that he is the bread of life. He says that himself in John 6. Right after he does the miracle, he says, I am the bread of life. Jesus declares that people are hungry. They are spiritually hungry, whether they know it or whether they don't know it. And he can feed us. He is the sustainer of life. If we don't feed on him, we will grow sick, spiritually sick and weak. So here in Miracle 1, John says this is the beginning. That's very important. This is the beginning of Jesus' miracles. John is very careful to tell us that in his narrative of this story. This is the beginning of Jesus' miracles. And it was a wedding. And to the consternation of the master of ceremonies and the host, the wine ran out. So the physical story. The wine was there to promote the joy of the celebrations. Wine does that, if you like wine. And you've had enough of it. Not too much, though. You don't want to get plastered. But wine promotes the joy of a celebration. And it ran out. Can your mind take you now to another book that John wrote, also on the island of Patmos? Can your mind take you to these glorious chapters of the book of Revelation, to the marriage banquet of the Lamb, and that vision? As John stands at the edge of eternity, the old earth, the old heavens disappeared. The new earth, the new heavens have come down out of heaven, says John, as a what? As a bride adorned for her husband. This is also a beginning. It's a new beginning. Jesus says it. John records it in John 21. Jesus said, I am making all things new. This is a new beginning. The beginning of eternity. And you'll be there. You'll be there at that marriage banquet of the Lamb. And oh, the joy of it. Are you sure it won't ever run out? That joy. How can you be sure that that joy will never run out? Because the presence of Jesus at the marriage banquet guarantees it. Guarantees it. This is the beginning of his earthly ministry. The marriage banquet of the Lamb is the beginning of his heavenly reign. It's a wedding. John's writing this stuff. He's writing both his gospel and he's writing the book of Revelation. And he's telling us at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, his first miracle was at a wedding. And the joy will never run out. And at the beginning of the marriage banquet of the Lamb in heaven, at the beginning of the new eternity, it's at a wedding. And the joy will never run out. Because the presence of Jesus guarantees it. Revelation 21, he shall dwell among them, they shall be his people, and God himself shall be among them. The angel says to John, write these words, for they are faithful and true. The master of ceremonies, when he tasted the water become wine, he called the bridegroom, and he said to him, everyone at the beginning puts out the good stuff. And when everyone's drunk well and can't tell the difference, then they put out the poorer wine. But you, he says, you have kept the good wine until now. So shall we all say, shall we not, when we get to heaven and enjoy that marriage banquet of the Lamb, when we get home to glory, to that great new beginning, the new heavens and the new earth, the new eternal city, and we'll see it and we'll be in it like a bride, says John, a bride made ready for her husband. Shall we not also say, you have kept the best wine till now? Amen. Miracle 8, no fish. No fish, no food. At the marriage banquet of the Lamb, what do you think we'll be doing? We'll be sitting down with Christ, eating with him, eating the food he has provided. He is the bread of life, enjoying the provision that he has made. This last miracle is like the first miracle. Jesus providing what was missing. John says in Revelation, he records Jesus' words, I am the beginning and the end. I am the first and the last. This first miracle and this last miracle. When, says Paul to the Ephesians, we are seated with Christ in the heavenly places, home at last, where the provision will never run out, where the joy will never run out, when we're seated with him who is the first and the last. This first sign and this last sign, John has deliberately, I believe, included in his gospel to tell us something bigger, to tell us something greater. They are signs. They are signs of something wonderful that is to come. We don't have time to talk about that today. Anyway, that was just a kind of a side here. What I wanted to do was look at 4 other miracles. Look at this miracle 2, the nobleman's son. What's the point of this story? The Lord can heal at a distance. That was the point of the story, wasn't it? The man said, come and heal my son, and the Lord said he didn't need to come. The boy was healed immediately. And that raised all sorts of questions that you may recall. So that's straightforward. We've established that Jesus can heal at a distance. He didn't need to go to Capernaum. He could heal at a distance. And to prove it wasn't a chance recovery, Jesus did it again. In Luke 7, he healed the servant of a Roman centurion at a distance. So the Lord has power to heal at a distance. It's very good. Now, what about this miracle 7? What about the raising of Lazarus? What's the point here? Well, Jesus and his disciples are ministering beyond Jordan. And when they're there, he gets a note from Martha and Mary way over in Bethany. And the note says, he whom you love is sick. And what do you suppose that meant? Well, it meant, please come and deal with it. Now, says John, Jesus loved Mary and Martha. So when he hears that Lazarus is sick, he stayed where he was. And we, because we are good students, we say, well, that doesn't matter, because he can heal at a distance. He doesn't have to go to Bethany, he can heal at a distance. And after that, they hear that Lazarus has fallen asleep, and the disciples think, well, that's good, he'll recover. Sleep is good for recovery. No, says the Lord, he's died. Died? Yes. And I'm glad I wasn't there. What? What's happened to his ability to heal at a distance? He didn't have to be there. He could have stopped this man dying without going. What's happened to his ability to heal at a distance? And so the Lord comes to Bethany. And if you read the story, you'll remember that Martha goes out to meet him before he even gets into the village. And he says, Lord, I'm so glad to see you, but you're too late. If only you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. If only you'd been here. And here comes Mary, right behind her. Lord, she says the same thing. If only you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. So miracle 2 and miracle 7 appear to contradict one another. Unless we find a reason why the Lord establishes in one place that he can heal at a distance, and in another place that he deliberately does not heal at a distance. And so there's a depth to these stories that you don't see standing alone. There's a depth to them if you begin to compare them that becomes clear. Now, there are reasons, of course, why Jesus didn't go initially to Lazarus when he was sick. We don't have time to cover these. Gary spoke about them last week. But he didn't come, and he didn't heal him at a distance. But Jesus didn't raise him at a distance. He might heal at a distance, but Jesus didn't raise him at a distance. To raise the dead, the Lord came to Bethany and spoke to the dead man, Lazarus, arise. If you're ever hoping to be raised from the dead, and I think you are, how will that happen? When the Lord sits on his Father's throne in heaven and says the word of command and we'll all rise? No, he'll come. He'll come. He's got to come. He will not raise us at a distance. This was a sign. John says these are signs, an outline of something bigger. The raising of Lazarus, physical and literal though it was a sign of something greater. A sign of what? Of the resurrection. And for that, the Lord will come. That's not fanciful, in case you think I'm getting carried away with myself. Jesus raised 3 people. Lazarus. He raised Jairus' daughter. You remember? He was told that the wee girl was gravely ill. And then a few minutes later, somebody came running up and said, "Don't bother him anymore. It's too late. She's dead." What does Jesus do? He comes to the house. He goes into the room and he speaks to her. "Little girl, arise." Jesus raised the widow of Nain's son. He's on his way to be buried. Jesus comes alongside the coffin and speaks to him. "Young man, arise." And deep down, in the caverns of the dead, the boy hears the voice of Jesus, the Son of God, and lives. I'll tell you, it's no secret. If he doesn't come for the next 100 years, you'll be dead too. The sign says he will not raise us at a distance. The sign says to raise the dead, he'll come and speak his word of command, and even if we're dead 1,000 years, we'll still hear his voice, and we will live. Acts 1, the angels say to the men standing on the top of Olivet, "This same Jesus, who has been taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you have watched him go." John was there. He heard that. He watched that. He heard those words. John lived the rest of his life remembering those words. This same Jesus will come. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy! A joy that will never run out. What joy shall fill my heart? Now, quickly, I need to move. Let's look at another 2. Let's look at number 3 and number 6. I'm working in the way here. You'll have worked that out. Take it. Number 3, the crippled man at Bethesda. And in this place, says John, at Bethesda, there was a pool. And as many as could get into this pool, when the water was troubled, they got healed, you see. And this poor man, who had lost the use of his legs, try and remember that. This poor man had legs, but he had lost the use of his legs. He had been there 38 years. And he so got his eyes fixed on this pool that when the Lord asks him, you remember Gary spoke about this, when the Lord asks him, "Do you want to be made whole?" the man doesn't say yes or no. The man says, "I've got no one to put me into the pool." Pool? Says Jesus. "I haven't come all this way to put you into a pool. I don't need a pool." Of course he doesn't need a pool. He can heal the man with his word. It's marvelous. Doesn't need a pool. Doesn't need the means. He can heal with the power of his word because of who he is. Wonderful. Great story. But what about miracle 6? What about the blind man in chapter 9? He had no thought whatever of going near a pool. Well, what blind man would, I ask you? And with mud in his eyes, in the bargain. No, never. He's going nowhere near a pool. So why does Jesus use a pool in miracle 6? And why does he not use the pool in miracle 3? They appear to contradict one another. In John chapter 8, just before Siloam, in John chapter 8, Jesus stands in the temple at the Feast of Tabernacles, the Festival of Lights, and he declares, I am the light of the world. That's the essence of that chapter. I am the light of the world. And to prove it, he then opens the eyes of a blind man. He declares in his teaching, and then he does a miracle. This is a theme of John's gospel. Jesus says, I am the bread of life, and he feeds 5,000 people. I am the light of the world, and he opens the eyes of a blind man. But this man hadn't lost his sight at some point in his life. This man hadn't gone blind at some point in his life. John is very careful to tell us that this man was born blind. It was a major issue of this story. You remember the story? The man was born blind. The light can shine all it likes, and this poor man would never have seen it. He's not got eyes to see it with. Jesus, the light of the world, was standing right in front of him, and the man would never have seen him. He's not lost his sight. He was born blind. He's got no eyes to see with. There's so much to say here, but we're running out of time. The pool. Jesus spits into the dust of the ground, and from the dust he makes a paste of mud and he puts it onto the man's eyes. What's he doing? Why is he doing that? At the pool of Bethesda, the crippled man's got legs. They don't work properly, but he's got legs. So Jesus, by his powerful word, makes the man whole. That's the word John uses. Do you want to be made whole? Jesus says to this man. He's got legs, but he's no power in them. At the pool of Siloam, the blind man has got no eyes to see with. So Jesus, out of the dust of the ground, sound familiar? Out of the dust of the ground, the Creator makes him eyes. This is an act of creation. The man had no eyes. He was born blind. He had no eyes to see with. He's never going to see unless Jesus makes him eyes. Then he says, go and wash in the pool. Now, John tells us that Siloam means sent. He tells us that in the story. He sends them to the pool of Siloam, and John tells us that means sent. Why does John bother to tell us that? Just a wee interesting piece and historical awareness. That's good. No. Remember, this is a sign. Jesus sends the man to the pool called Sent. 3 verses before that, in chapter 9, Jesus says, I must work the works of him who sent me. Oh, so Jesus, he was sent too. Is that just an interesting piece? It just so happens that John has Jesus saying, I must work the works of him who sent me. And then 3 verses later, Jesus sends the man to the pool called Sent. I read through John's Gospel this month, and I noticed that John repeatedly refers to Jesus as being sent, the sent one. John 3:16 is the most famous of all. God so loved the world that he sent his son. Do you know how many times John refers to Jesus as being sent? I counted them and highlighted them in yellow highlighter in my Bible. 40 times. 40 times. I would need to be thick to miss this. 40 times John has Jesus describing himself as being sent. Him who sent me. Him who sent me. God sent his son. God sent his son, and in obedience he came, the light of the world. Jesus sends this man, and in obedience he goes to what? To what, says John in that same chapter? To bear witness of the light of the world. In John 17, Jesus prays to his Father, as you have sent me into the world, even so I have sent them into the world. Different pools, different miracles, different signs. That's why Jesus used a pool in one miracle and didn't use the pool. Different signs. They're not contradictions. He hadn't lost his power in any shape or form. He was trying to say something different. Now, let me say this in finishing, because it's really, I think, quite important. In this blind man miracle at Siloam, the Pharisees got the point of Jesus giving sight to the blind man. In John chapter 9 it says, "Those of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things and said to him, 'We're not blind too, are we?' And Jesus said to them," listen to this, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But since you say, 'We can see,' your sin remains." Jesus said, if you were blind, you would have no sin. This man had no eyes. The light of the world was right in front of him, but he had no eyes. He couldn't be blamed for not seeing him. Remember, that was what the disciples wanted to know. Who's to blame? Remember that from the top of the story? Who's to blame? Who's to blame this man's blind? Is it him? Is it his parents? Who did something wrong? Who's to blame? Jesus said neither. Neither of them to blame. Not this man and not his parents. Those who come into the world born blind, who never will be able to see spiritually. The baby who dies in infancy. The child who dies before reaching an age of spiritual understanding. The adult with learning difficulties who will never understand the meaning of salvation through the grace of God. These dear ones can't see. And they can't be blamed for not seeing. They are eternally safe in heaven. If you were blind, says Jesus, you would have no sin. They couldn't see, could never see. They are eternally safe because they can't be blamed. It is willful blindness. It is reckless blindness. It is indifferent blindness to the light of the world. That is what God will judge. For those who say, we can see, I understand the gospel, and I don't believe it. I don't accept him. I don't want to see the light of the world. God will judge that, where people can make that distinction and understanding for themselves. Well, I don't have time to look at 4 and 5. Sorry about that. Feeding of the 5,000. Jesus does a miracle with his hands, and then he does a miracle with his feet. Did you know Jesus did a miracle with his feet? Not many people can do that. Well, he did. Anyway, we don't have time to talk about that. Where on earth is all this getting us? The design of miracles. Well, I put it to you that it's getting us ever more deeply into the remarkable Word of God. It's all here. All we need to do is dig a little. And in digging, we find the riches of divine wisdom. And I trust you've enjoyed that. It's been a bit different. I've been a bit concerned about that, but I enjoyed it, looking at this remarkable book of John, and trust that the Lord might imprint it on our hearts, and that the Lord Jesus will be ever more glorified. Thank you.